Welcome back, everyone, to the Beyond Condition podcast, where today we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome, and we'll see where that takes us organically, as we normally do, Steff. But there's so much that falls under this topic. It's crazy as a competitor, and chasing aesthetic desires, you know, that body dysmorphic state that we go through in prep, in off season, all of the phases as a competitor. It really is a mind warp at the best of times. So it'd be really nice to talk about that today, and hopefully, you know, relate to some of our listeners, and for us to share some advice as to how people can get through these points.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody at some point, whether you're a real high achiever, whether you're somebody who, you know, is maybe just starting out in something and starting to build confidence into something that they've never done before, we have moments of severe self-doubt that can be quite crippling and can be brought on by like a myriad of different things. I mean, obviously, living in a world of social media, that's a huge factor in, I think, our perceptions of ourselves and what we should or shouldn't be doing, and what looks good on the outside and what you should be trying to achieve and sometimes isn't realistic, etc. So I'm sure we'll go into a lot of that today.
Yeah, because imposter syndrome in itself, you know, like you say there, in this day and age, social media is so prevalent, and by looking at other people, or, you know, focusing on what other people are achieving, you can then find yourself in this really lonely place of thinking that you're potentially underachieving. But it might be that you're at the level where you're achieving everything you need to do, and actually, you know, if you were to look back at your own progress, it's like, wow, I've achieved a lot here. But if you're there, you know, it could be that you're looking at professional athletes and thinking, oh, I should be there, and you're doing your first prep, as an example. You know, it's about trying to be realistic with where you're at, and then gearing everything towards being able to achieve big things, but doing it in the time frame that's realistic for you.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think it's like really natural for us all to wonder how we like measure up to other people in our societies, like in our own little worlds and in our communities, and particularly in a competitive environment. I'm often talking about a bit of self-doubt it can go like one of two ways. It can be a really healthy way to adapt, because it can actually make you better at what you're doing, because a little bit of self-doubt allows you to kind of push the boundaries and challenge yourself, I think, because to see what you're capable of. And I guess off the back of that, you can actually catalyze a little bit of growth as well. Like, you can actually, when you experience a little bit of self-doubt out with a place of comfort, when you're in an uncomfortable new setting, like say you're just coming into bodybuilding and you've never done a show before, and all of this is really new to you, it's an uncomfortable place to be, but it's also really exciting and it spurs you on to grow. And so those uncertain qualities of it allow you to grow and build. So something good comes from that unsettlement, you know, that concern, you're maybe never done this before. And I think also like acknowledging that you don't really know everything can open up massive new learning opportunities and kind of prompt, you know, like positive contributions to what you're doing as well. So that's like the positive side of it. I think self-doubt can help you become, if you want it to, the best version of yourself, and see you really kind of take things to new heights.
Let it motivate you rather than hold you back.
100%, yeah. And I think it's probably important to start with that people often think like imposter syndrome just means the negative of that, which we'll go into, but it's not always. It can also mean, okay, when you're feeling like that, check in with yourself and go, is this just because I'm maybe doing something I've never done before and I'm in an uncomfortable place? And from a place of discomfort, that's where you're going to see some serious changes in yourself, and you want to lean into that and really kind of explore what that discomfort means, because usually it's a sign of you're just about to have a breakthrough into being a much bigger version of yourself, and whatever that looks like.
Yeah, and it's so easy to forget how far you've come, and that's why reflection is one of the biggest things I try and hit home to people. You know, reflect back on where you started, where you're heading, rather than it being setting an ultimate goal, as it were. So a massive goal. Think of the ways that you can increment up towards that, so you can get daily wins, you can hit small targets that contribute to the overall success, but also think about where you come from that start point to get to that first goal, that second goal, that third goal, and realize that it is a journey. Because especially in this sport, I find that a lot of us have the personality where we want everything yesterday or straight away.
And
it's not, when you're changing your body composition, it'd be nice to say that you can do it quickly, but that has a lot of negative connotations as well with your relationship with doing this. So if you can see it for a long period of time and set those small goals that contribute to the bigger goal, you hit these points of thinking I'm not good enough or I haven't done enough. You can think, well, actually, I've done a lot already. I've just got a lot to go.
Yeah. I think a lot of this like correlates with the state of mind you're in, like your mental health as well, because it's really easy for us to sit here and kind of talk about like the balance of like the understanding that principle when you're catching yourself, in a place of self-doubt or thinking, oh, I'm not good enough, or this person's way better, or I'm not going to be able to do that. It's very hard to stop that thought track from going down a place of crippling anxiety, or in some people's state of mind, if they've not perhaps done the work yet or maybe figured out what this all is for them, it can lead to really nasty feelings of incompetence and incapability, and it can actually start to stall. And this is like the negative side of it, isn't it? Like this is where it can stall people's performance, and it can kind of almost stunt you fully, and you don't really know what to do, where to go, and how to deal with it. And instead of the excitement that you had once for it beginning, it can start to go the other way, where it can implode and actually you become way less able to perform. So it's finding out, ideally, and it's something like we always talk about within the bodybuilding world, when you're doing something that's so outwardly critical, it's judgmental, you've got to come into this feeling like you've got a good set of tools in the psychological bank ready for it. Because I don't know about you, Sarah, I can be quite open about this. I've done preps where I've really questioned myself on a lot of different things and wondered, why am I doing this? I'm not happy. I've maybe been having a lot of other things going on in my world at that time. I'm looking at fellow competitors or fellow friends who are, seem to be acing life, whether that's online or actually in person as well. And I just sort of, have those moments where you're in your room on your own or in your house on your own, and you're like, what the hell am I doing? I feel completely shit at all of this. And it's in those moments where you're not speaking about it, where you're not listening to podcasts, where you're not doing whatever, how do you dig out of those holes and realize that you are worth it? You are a fantastic, human being with all these attributes everybody else has. Sometimes you have to harness it within you and figure a way out of those dark moments, I suppose.
Yeah, like the negative thought processes. I definitely find with experience of actually having those thought processes that I've been able to work out for myself how I can get through those. One of the biggest things that I sort of fall back on if these things happen is riding those thoughts out. So, pressurizing myself to think I should feel really positive all the time. Being able to, I guess it's like a level of acceptance, isn't it? Like, okay, so today, what it's like, some days you wake up and you think, I just feel like shit. And that is very prevalent in a prep as well. You're training a lot, you're in a deficit, all of these things that contribute to you not feeling that good all the time. Like we say, in a prep, ideally you will still feel good, but realistically, the days that you feel worse are going to be more so than if you're in a growth phase, maintenance phase, or out of the deficit phase. So I find that if I can just go, okay, it is what it is. Today is not, it's not going to feel like my best day. What can I do to help myself be able to still do what I need to do, plan, but not put pressure on myself to feel positive, to want to engage in every conversation I normally would, or, sometimes it might be that you want to put your phone away that day. You don't want to engage as much on Instagram with friends, things like this. And then the next day you're going to almost refuel and come back to your normal self. But yeah, I don't tend to spend time now criticizing myself when I feel like this. I try to accept it rather than fight it.
Yeah, I think that's really admirable. And I think it takes work to get there. I think something as well, like I encourage people who are maybe not quite there yet and they don't trust themselves to make that call, right? They don't, their thoughts are maybe so entrenched that they're not thinking rationally, right, about where they're at. And so the crippling thoughts of self-doubt, low self-esteem, potential low self-worth I'm not good enough. I can't be as good as these other people. They're catastrophizing. There's actually like a clinical explanation for that. And that's, you know, you've got these thought processes going on in your brain, but and you're feeding them into this kind of negative feedback loop. But what's actually you're not doing is then bolstering those thoughts with anything else, so they become real, like they become completely your world and real thoughts. So, and then you become in this place where you're not actually able to see rationally about what you give back or like who you actually are. So if you don't trust your own facts, your own stuff, and maybe you're at a point where I'm not happy, but is this really who I am? Like, am I this person that I'm kind of conjuring myself up? Is to actually talk to people that you trust around you, ask them. And I've been in this position before as well, where if you don't trust where your mind is at that point, ask somebody around you who's really close to you, a friend or whatever, hey, you know me, right? You've known me since X. What do you see, or can you feed back to me what you see or what you think of me in terms of my personality? And that's a really vulnerable question to ask, right?
That's hard.
Super hard. But honestly, I can't even tell you how incredibly like valuable this is. And I've done this on a couple of occasions through my life, actually very recently as well. Sharing like your imposter feelings, like how you feel yourself, like concerns about yourself with somebody else, can not only kind of reduce your catastrophizing in your brain, it allows somebody else to help you tap into areas that you've maybe not thought about. Like, oh, this person thinks this of me. And you know what? Somewhere down the line, a few years ago, I thought about that about myself too. So how have I lost that? Where's that gone? And I think another reason that's really helpful is it can reduce like loneliness that you might have yourself, because it can be very isolating when you're sitting thinking I'm not good enough, or I don't have these tools that everybody else has. And bodybuilding particularly is an extremely isolating sport. And if you are someone who is struggling with like imposter syndrome, or, you know, I say imposter syndrome, I think we all do at some point, but just those heavy feelings of I can't do this, we need to open the doors and share this with other people so that you feel less isolated. And we need to be strategic as well about who we share it with, people that you really trust, because these are vulnerable feelings. Hopefully maybe that something like that would help people.
Yeah, that feeds into what we were talking about when Rob came on the pod,
Yeah.
where, you know, it's the external pressures of when you want to compete and you start a prep or whatever phase you're going into, and people start to question that. You know, I've been there myself, and I think a lot of people listening could potentially be up against that. And that then you think, should I be doing a prep because X, Y, and Z don't think I should? And should I eat like this? Is this a weird choice to do bodybuilding? Because it is away from the norm. And you have those thoughts of, should I even prep and continue? And then when you're combining that with the lower energy levels, the cognitive function being affected, all the things that come with a prep, that then, like we've mentioned before, it turns from like a little pea to your whole world. Everything you're doing, you're questioning. And then that then builds that negative relationship with bodybuilding, but maybe it's more something you need to work on as a person rather than blaming it on the sport, as it were. Because I've done that before, you know, bodybuilding has made me this, bodybuilding has caused this. But actually sometimes it can unleash things that we have as tendencies as people into all different realms when you commit to something like a prep.
Yeah, absolutely. It brings out your best and your worst traits, I think, prep. And without you even realizing it, I think it brings out sometimes your worst traits, because you like exactly as you've just said there, you become so tired, snappy, but irritable, and a little bit like lackluster. Like you lose emotion in prep. You become quite robotic, and you can actually become quite what I call like you're a non-empath. You don't really give a fuck about much. But you do, and that can actually be hard as well, because then people are like, what's happened to her? Have you ever been in the gym, right, where somebody off season is a completely different person to the person that's on prep, right? And then they come off prep. I've actually got somebody in my mind who I've got a few people in my mind, to be fair, who on prep are completely and utterly emotionless. And you can miscount that and think it's actually more like they're just being a moody arsehole. You know what I mean? You think, oh, they're a bit of a dick. They're not. They're just on prep. But then they come off prep and it's like this personality emerges and you're like, oh, there they are. That's the real them.
Cool. That's what I always try and like maintain my personality throughout, but there is days or even sometimes a few days where you think this is really hard. Like I just can't find the energies to be extrovert, as it were, and lead conversations and like go out of my way to start, you know, interacting with someone like you would when you've got your full energies. Because let's face it, you need to start, especially, you know, 4 to 6 weeks out, you need to start thinking, where do my energies need to be used? Because you know, you're working at the same time, but all the things that come under a prep to do, if you then do things like book social occasions at weekends and various other things, you start running out of time to have that time to reboot, to be able to just conquer the next day, let alone the rest of the prep. And then that again can feed into like a negative thought process, because you think, I just haven't got the time to do everything.
Yeah, exactly. I know. And that sort of feeling up against it, not getting everything in. Am I doing enough? Have I missed a session? That means I'm, you know, a little bit behind. These are all things that can start to manifest and build up over time, for sure. And I think it kind of comes back to there's like a lot of solace in knowing that there's other people perhaps experiencing what you're experiencing, and being able to sort of share your insecurities about certain things, and then allow that you can lean on people for new ways of coping. Like, this is why I have groups for my team. I was actually speaking to one of my clients just before this earlier today, and she was saying how awesome the group has been for supporting her. She does really well in a supportive group. That yes, we have the coaching, but then she can literally, on a day where she knows she doesn't want to bug me, she can jump in the group and go, guys, struggling today, any tips, any help, any motivation? And they all bolster each other, they all help each other out, which is excellent. But they can also be reasonably vulnerable and go, guys, I'm really worried I'm not going to do so well. And they can all sort of share in that, I've been there too, feeling. And that's then when it's really important for all of us, and going right back to what you said at the start, just celebrating your successes, the small things day to day, because they should never, ever be discounted. And in bodybuilding, we have this air of everything is like got to be hard. Everything's got to be shit. If you're not suffering, then it's this. And I know we've said that before, but it's a really unhelpful mindset, because then it discounts all of the day-to-day successes that you're doing. And people are just brushing those off. Well, that's what you've got to do to be a bodybuilder. Well, actually, those are things that most people walking around in the world right now physically can't do. They're really, really important skills and things that you should be bloody proud of, that you're sticking to a diet, being determined, being focused, getting up when you don't want to go do your cardio. You know, like, that shows a level of grit, determination, focus 99% of the population don't even have.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, when you speak with people that aren't into bodybuilding or what have you, like, it does take you back to, not many people actually do this to the level of commitment that, you know, our clients, that we do ourselves, people that we know. It is a lifestyle. It's day in, day out, and it's accepting, you know, that is a choice, and trying to look at the positives from what you're doing. You know, it takes a lot to change habits and to change your lifestyle. So when you're going from not knowing much about changing your body composition to then jumping into this, in that first couple of weeks, your wins are going to be massive compared to where you were when you started. But we always are looking to the next bit rather than thinking, actually, what have we achieved already?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's always feeding into that, like, I haven't done enough. Whereas you could look back and think, okay, I've done everything my coach said. I've, you know, learned X, Y, and Z. And then you can move forward feeling confident in your progress. It falls back to, like you mentioned at the start, you know, comparing yourself to others and where other people are potentially at. When we look at things like social media, you don't know people's background, genetics, any of those things that are massive contributors to how they look. And you can't be anyone else. You know, everyone has different structure, everyone has different genetics, everyone has different work ethic. If you can apply your own work ethic and know that you're doing the plan to the letter, that is the, you know, the biggest thing that you can do to be able to sit tight and go, I'm doing everything I can.
Yeah. And on the back of that, like, you have to let go of this idea of perfectionism. Like, I'm almost saying this to myself as well. Like, you don't have to lower like the bar, but you do need to adjust your standards for success that equates to where you're at. Like, you have to make it easier for you to see and internalize like your accomplishments, because you can't, if you set the bar at IFBB status before you've even stepped on stage, you are going to be in for a major crash. You know, like, letting go of perfectionism is so important. None of us are perfect. No one prep is going to be perfect. No one look is going to be perfect, but you can get as close as you can based on the set of circumstances that you have for your realistic goal at that point in time, if you stick to, you know, your plan, etc. But I think like we need to like resist this sort of, how do I say this, like this urge to say you're a total failure if you don't meet like this kind of unrealistic set of expectations that you have in your head or that you set for yourself. Like, you can't go into an IFBB event your first time and then not place and then come away from that and say I'm a failure and this and that. But a lot of people do, because there's this unrealistic expectation that everyone should be able to be a winner straight off the bat, or I don't know, like maybe you have ideas of where your physique is at that aren't quite there yet. And that's a hard pill to swallow, but it's also one you have to face up to. You know, not everyone is going to be where they need to be at day dot. So I guess what I'm saying there is like breaking the, sitting down yourself and going, okay, where am I at? What's a realistic goal for me? Is that achievable? It goes back to the sort of standard PT school goals, SMART goals.
Yeah.
You know, is it time effective? Can I do it in the time? Is it achievable in the time frame? You know, all these sorts of things. It's just being mindful of what your expectation is of yourself and not expecting you to be this kind of completely unrealistic expectation that you're never going to meet.
Yeah. And something that we do come across in our sport as well, where you mentioned IFBB, you know, when I first started out in the sport, I didn't realize that there was even assisted athletes in my category, in particular bikini. I just never ever thought that that was a thing. I just assumed it was like big male bodybuilders and female bodybuilders. And I had a conversation with Stephen many years ago, and I'd sent him a photo of a girl that I was like, that's what I want to look like. And he then was like, let's jump on a call. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. And straight away he said, that's not you. This person has different genetics, etc., like I mentioned earlier. And then he said, we would be naive to think that this person isn't using PEDs. And I'm like, what? She's in bikini. And IFBB, that is, you know, it's unrealistic to think that not most of the people competing would be using PEDs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it also falls back to, you know, that imposter syndrome of being realistic with, you don't know what people are using within the sport, because it is bodybuilding. You know, it's very, very rife in our sport. And if you're looking at untested federations, you know, we have a mixture of natural athletes and assisted. Listening to the pod, you got to be realistic with that as well. You know, if you're competing with a natural fed, then you're on a level playing field, as it were, against everyone that is natural. If you're going into all the other federations, you really don't know. You don't know who you're competing against and what that setup is.
No, you're right. And that's a whole other level. And I think that a lot of people experience a lot of worries about that in this sport. You know, it's not something I can kind of speak directly on, but I've got a lot of friends myself in the industry who have discussed this. And it's a tricky one, because I think, again, it comes down to, if you look at, I mean, I know natural sport, been in it the whole time throughout my career here. It does limit the amount of concern when you're standing on stage. You stand on stage, you know, everybody on that lineup is stuck to the diet, done their training for a very freaking long time. And you're all there, you know, laying it out, and may the best man win on the day. So it does take out this concern of, you know, what's what and who's done what and what does that mean for me, and is the person on my left been doing something else that I've not done, and that's a different kettle of fish altogether, and it can be extremely concerning for a lot of people, and I think mentally it can be a bit of a mindfuck too.
Yeah, because it's all back to being realistic with your expectations. One of the biggest bits of advice I give to people, because I do get people ask me about this type of stuff, and I just say, you know, if you are competing with an untested federation, then I would make sure that your why is strong enough for you to do that and take the placing that you get, you know, because there is a difference in physique if you're assisted and you're not. But if you're going into an untested federation, I think that you need to, you know, you have to take that into mind, that is the case. You know, there isn't testing, so, you know, it's a physique sport, and that's how it is.
Exactly. Yes. And that is just part of it. Like you say, when you're going on to an open stage, you are accepting that is part of the game in terms of the result that may come from it.
It's being realistic, isn't it? And I guess, you know, going into that competition knowing that if you know that you've done your best and you're happy with your performance, letting that ring true when you go into that potential post-show period, into that mind warp that comes after competing in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, like coming off the expectation side of it, it's like acceptance. Like, you know, we've said this hundreds of times, but bodybuilding is a very subjective sport. It's accepting that what you're going into has lots of levels. It's not an easy sport by any stretch of the imagination. No sport is. Sport is competitive. Sport is full of political decisions. Sport is full of like nefarious things that go on that you don't hear about. This person's done that, and this person, you know, yada yada. It's all of that. It's up to you in your little tiny corner of your sport to stick to your goal and to sort of stick true to your values and morals and whatever that is, you know, and being okay with where you are in the journey of it, whether that's right at the very start and having realistic expectations for yourself. Yes, you're going to have little thoughts that creep in about, you know, this person might be better, or who's my competition. And we've probably all been in that spot where you're on Instagram searching for who's doing I'm just going to choose my fed in the moment, WMBF UK on the 17th, and they're searching the hashtags and trying to find out who's doing what. Probably everybody listening to this and ourselves have done that, you know, where you're looking at your competition and you're like, oh my God, that person's delt is so much bigger than mine.
I was going to say that person's delt's popping more than me, because that's what I always used to think.
It's always the bloody delt in the picture.
Always the delt. Honestly. Always looked at the delts. I don't know. And this girl that I mentioned earlier, when Stephen was like, look, that's not you, it was her delts that I wanted. Because it's like, the thing is as well, when you compete, we've mentioned this before, you don't know what that person's going to look like on stage, whether they've nailed their posing. Like, it's crazy, isn't it? Like, I've seen people that look insane, but they can't pose.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting as well is like, and if I think back to when I first started this, I am going to be honest with you now, though, I don't search people now, like, at all. I don't I do not care one bit what another person looks like. Like, I am so focused on just trying to be the best version of myself, like, now. But I think that's come from years of experience and also a lot of life experience, and that's something we'll probably go into in a sec as well. But when I first started, every picture on Instagram was like a representation of exactly what they're going to look like. In my head, it was like, oh my God, that person's leg is so big. That means that their legs are going to be ginormous, and that means that I'm never going to place, and I'm never going to have legs like that, and yada yada. And it was just spiral like that. Do you know what I mean? And now, from being on the flip side, from growing, from obviously doing all of this for a long time, coaching, etc., it's so true. But you do not know who is actually going to look good. Even the people on socials who are freaking amazing marketeers, by the way, who are using Canva and InShot and all these amazing apps to make themselves look insane, right? And they're putting their pictures up. Even those people, when they get up on stage, half of the time, no disrespect, I am so unimpressed. I'm like, I had such great expectations for this person who have managed to be amazing on their grid, you know,
Yeah.
and then they get up in a lineup and you're like, they're lost, or they're maybe nowhere near as good as they make themselves look on Instagram. And actually in the grand scheme, if you know anything about bodybuilding, you can really see the people who are in insane shape and the ones that aren't, and it gives you perspective of what people are showing you on their grids and things like that. So don't be fooled.
Yeah, and don't let that hold you back. You know, it's when you mentioned that there, I just had so many thoughts flooding in my mind of all of those times when I've sat there like obsessively scrolling through Instagram. And the competition that I have coming up in 6.5 weeks, I know a couple of people that I am competing against, and it's the first time for ages that I've known people that I'm going to compete against, because I've done international shows. You literally haven't got a Scooby who's going to turn up, and there's no point.
Exactly. Yeah.
You literally don't know. And because this is back to the UK, and I know a few people, I'm purposely not looking at what they're doing because I don't need to do that. I know them. I will try and have, like you've mentioned before, a nice day with them, you know, when you're backstage and all of these things. Still maintain my own tunnel vision on what I need to do, but I'm not going to start looking at their profiles and things because I just don't feel like it's going to do anything positive for me. If that makes sense.
And it won't, because the thing is the nature of looking at somebody else, the nature of seeking out and looking at somebody else means that already, before you've even gone to the page, you have an insecurity. There's something there that's going, just a wee look, just to have a little, and you're already, you know what I mean, like you're doubting yourself, and you can't change. You might get onto that person's profile and go, oh, and then you're like hooked in, and then you're looking at the person, and then it solidifies further the doubt, and it's just not helpful. The best thing you can do, some people are okay with that, can come away from the page and just go, okay, I looked at that, right, fine, I can move on with my life. But some people can't, and if you're one of those people that this is crippling you, be honest with yourself and mute the person, come off social media completely for a break. Maybe you're closer to your show and you just need to focus on you. There's no harm in just capping your time on these platforms, you know, just don't allow yourself to go there. You focus on the things that are within your control, and find strategies that will help you accept that you are going to have a little bit of comparison mindset. It's normal, but taming those feelings, like the imposter feelings, so that they're within your control rather than letting them kind of grow arms and legs and everything else. You're never going to get rid of those feelings completely, because we all do it. It's natural. We're humans. We all want to be better. We're all looking at people around us. Even if it wasn't in bodybuilding, it might be like, I don't know, you want a nice car, or you want some nice clothes, or whatever else, you know what I mean? Like, we're all trying to strive to be better, and that also includes comparing to other people and what they have to better yourself. So they're never going to go away, but it's taming them and making sure that you know when it's getting a little bit out of hand and starting to play a negative role on your performance, on who you are.
Yeah, because I feel like you mentioned there, I'm at a point where I can look at, you know, if I follow someone and I'm competing against, so I can like it and comment, that's cool. I tend not to go into that like searching for them with that in my mind, like you say, that insecurity in my mind as to how are they getting on, because I'm competing against them, because that thought process doesn't tend to do anyone any good. I don't think, you know, I'm assuming here to a certain degree, but I can't see that seeking someone out in the back of your mind, am I good enough, would ever benefit you in any way.
Yeah, not at all. And I think, like, I mean, I may be generalizing here because I know a few guys that struggle with this too, but I think women, us ladies, are particularly bad for this. You know, we're very self-critical. A lot of us are very self-aware. We overanalyze. We do a lot of that. And we often discount our positives a lot of the time, particularly in bodybuilding. I think a lot of the time we look so hard at like what our flaws are and not a lot of what the good stuff is. So yeah, all of these things combined today, there's a little bit of acceptance. There's a little bit of not setting your expectations too high. There's like a bit of sharing your failures and making sure that you have a group of people around you who can help you rationalize maybe when you're starting to catastrophize things in your head. There's like cultivating a little bit of self-compassion, being decent to yourself, like you're working really hard, what are your successes, like being a little bit more present in your journey will help you not let your unconscious or your subconscious get out of control, because then you can go, okay, well, even if that person over there looks like this, I'm doing this every day, and I'm sticking to it, and I'm really fucking proud of that. I'm okay with that. That's giving yourself a bit of self-compassion.
Crazy, isn't it? Like that mind warp stage in a prep, we've both said before, when we get to this point, like 6 weeks out, you start zoning in on those areas that, you know, the stubborn areas that come off last. And you look at the whole physique. Like when I look at my physique, I look straight at my legs where I hold that last bit of fire, and I just look straight at that. And then I have people saying now, oh, you're getting prep face, or oh, you're looking really lean now. And I'm like, I look at my face, no, I'm not. And it's really hard because you do enter this body dysmorphic state. Some days you can't pull yourself out of it. It becomes this like massive mind warp. And I definitely would say that I fall back on the inner circle now. I speak to people and I feel better about that. But I still, when people say you're looking lean now, I'm like, no, I don't. In my head, I'm like, no, I don't, because I know what it takes to get to stage lean.
Yeah, I know. And I think exactly, actually, I think the last podcast we just did on, you know, getting to that stage, that next level, went down really, really well with our listeners. If you haven't listened to that, go listen to it, guys. But you in your own head are never going to be good enough. You're never going to be lean enough. You're never going to be this, that, and the other. And that's why it is really important to just lean on the people around you to just give you a bit of practical analysis of where you're at.
It's like, yeah, it's that whole point of, you know, what you've done already is trying to take that into your own. I've done really well here. I've done X amount of months or weeks to get to this point. Yes, I need to get to stage condition, but that will happen. And that's why, like, if I didn't have a coach, I think, well, I'd be my own worst enemy. I'm not sure that I'd ever be able to coach myself, because it's nuts, isn't it? Like all those peaks and troughs that you go through every day of, am I doing enough? Have I done enough? Oh, I'm getting close to the competition. Am I even going to be able to compete at that show?
Yeah. It's funny because like I'm kind of the opposite, like with coaching myself. Yeah. Because I think, I don't know, I think actually my next prep, if I was to prep again, I think I've said this on the pod, I think I might get somebody to come in my corner that's not as close to me as say Andrew would be, for example. But I find I know myself so well, and I can give myself a really good kick up the arse when I need it, but I can also I can allow myself to revel in the woes of prep sometimes as well. I don't know. And maybe I'm just being more self-reflective rather than anything. But I think I trust my process, and I trust how I can use that to get me to where I need to be. And I sometimes think like I need to back myself because I've done this many times before, and I also help people get there. So it's a kind of an important part of the process for me to back my coaching in my own coaching, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I had these thoughts because people say to me, you still pay for coaching? You've been doing it for years. And I'm like, yeah.
I get it though, because I coach a lot of coaches. You know, I get it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's not even necessarily that I need to be accountable even. Like I don't have a problem with doing what I need to do for a plan. I guess there's parts of it where I'm like, I just love how my plan's delivered. I know exactly what I need to do. I can do my stuff, work, all of these things, and just execute the plan. And also I don't know if I'd be able to get to that point where I'd be able to be objective enough with my own progress to not think, right, food's going down, training's going up.
Yeah.
Do that too prematurely, potentially, because the prep brain has started kicking in a little bit, like just little things, and I think, oh god, prep brain is on its way.
Have you felt the pinch yet? Are you feeling the pinch? Have you felt any sort of concerns or feelings like this we're talking about today already?
Yeah, I think probably now I'm touching on 6 weeks out, those thoughts are more regular in regards to like So an example would be someone at the gym I use asked if they could come and watch me compete. And I was like, well, let's wait till near the time, because you never know if you're going to be ready. And I guess those types of little thoughts come in. Tom is like super, super chuffed with my progress. I also think that, I know it sort of might sound minute, but going to Fit Expo this weekend, I almost feel like meeting people in person and people knowing that I'm 6 weeks out. I want them to feel like I look like I'm 6 weeks out. If that makes sense. I think that's probably contributed to it being a bit more heightened potentially in the last like 2 weeks, because I'm like, I'm going to see all of the people that know I'm in prep, you know, from Instagram. I'm going to meet new people as you do at expos that I've spoken to on Instagram, and I really want to look the part, but I need to not let that pressurize. You've said it before, it's not show day at FitX. You know, that's not when I'm going to be looking at my best. But I sort of think, and then I also find, I don't know if you get this yourself, when I'm due a deload, that last week before a deload, I can start accumulating some fatigue, but also some inflammation. So I tend to feel like I look almost a bit worse before a deload. And then I end up, my food goes up on deload week, and the training comes either right down, or next week, so I'm away, I'm not training at all. Look better, and I lose weight on more food and less exercise. And I'm like, huh? But I feel like my body is really sensitive to that so much more in this prep. Like, it's like, is it a deload? And then my body responds really well. And then I'd imagine, I'm hoping that I come back from Croatia having had time away and the deload, that I'll feel ready for that next 5 weeks to just push it all the way through. But definitely these thoughts of, I've put that pressure on myself, and I like this pressure. I've said to you before, I love the pressure of trying to be better, but it also has its downfalls, because you want to almost want to jump forward to 6 weeks time, see what I look like, and then come back and do it. Like, I wouldn't mind doing that, but I'm like, you know, it's mainly the areas that do carry the last bits of fat. You start zoning in on them, and you just want them to go, because you want to know that they're not going to be there on show day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting, like, hearing you as well talk about that, because I know, like, when you see people that you've not seen in a really long time, or people that you've not seen in ages or whatever, you want them to obviously make reference. I think it's a really good indicator that things are moving in the right direction when people go, oh, you look leaner, and you're like, yes, the prep is working, everything's cool. It does help. But I think, you know, these sorts of events as well, like, you want to look fit, healthy, athletic, lean, but you're not on show yet. You're not there yet, so don't stress.
It is. It's definitely, I speak to a lot of people about, you know, things like expos and what have you, and I know people that do a diet for an expo, because it's quite a lot of pressure, you know. Like, if you're on one of the stands, you know, I know different people that are going to be there. Rimini will be there with CMP, you know, different people that will be there. And I've been to expos in off season, and there is an edge of like, oh, I want to look the part, but again, off season, you're rocking gains, and that's a really good opportunity to show that off and tell people about it and all of these things. But I guess we all sort of build these things up in our mind to be something that potentially they're not, because you go and you think, well, actually, I look quite good, and then you come away from it
100%.
Why did I worry about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say, I've done a lot of expos working them. Like, I worked Body Power for like 6 years. I can't even believe that. But 6 years I worked that show, until obviously it died last year.
It died a death. No more freebies from Body Power.
No more freebies from Body Power. But my God, I did like 4 of those years on prep. One of those years was my wedding prep. The other one's prep.
Yeah.
And then one of them was off season, and I remember enjoying the off season one the most, because that's when you could go around and just eat all the protein bars.
And you can have fun with like friends and stuff. You can be, oh, should we go and get a donut or whatever?
Yeah.
Then the same sort of off the back of that qualities in prep, because you all sit and have your Tupperware together, so you can find the people that are at the same.
Yeah, I know. And like, it's quite nice actually, because like, obviously Body Power didn't go ahead this year in May. Usually in May, obviously it was cancelled, and then we've got the first couple of expos coming up this year. The FitX and PCA are doing one as well. And I think like it'll be quite nice for people to get back into that environment, because we all love an expo, but I think a lot of people have especially our first timers, right? A lot of them will have never experienced an expo.
I love it. I'm like, bodybuilding mode is activated. Time to peacock.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm absolutely devastated because I was due to be coming down this weekend. This is something that can actually drive into our imposter syndrome chat. I have, for those of you who know on my Instagram already, broken my foot, Joy, and it takes me back actually to when I had a really, really bad sprain of the same foot ankle, which took me off it for a good 6 weeks as well. But that was in my 2019, my first professional prep. No, sorry, I lie. It was in the year I was gunning for my first pro card in 2017. I was off it for like 6 weeks in the middle of a prep, and I genuinely thought that I was never going to get to the stage. This was something out with my control, that it meant that there was no way in hell I was going to be competitive enough to go for the goal that I'd had set in my mind that year. I'd been competing for sort of 6 years by that point. This was the year I was gunning for that finals, for that pro season, to get my first natural pro card. And genuinely, the thoughts that were going through my head during that sort of 6 week stint, because I had sprints to do, you'll have heard me on the podcast talk about how horrendous it is for me to get fat off. I have to do a lot. So a big chunk of that prep was taken away from the expenditure that I had to do. And in a situation like that, your mind just goes off on one. For those listening who have potentially had an injury, I've got a client at the moment who's just had one as well, 3 weeks out, and she's struggling with a shoulder injury. Things happen during your preps, guys. Like, they happen. Life happens. Sometimes you have to take a moment, and that's a time where you really need to watch the self-doubt and the concerns, because there are a lot of things you can do around it. But that's when, that's another thing we need to be mindful of during preps, is just to be very, very careful, or just during anything, is that if life comes up along and slaps you in the face, what are you going to do? Are you going to let it cripple the journey that you're on, or are you going to find that little bit of resilience and remind yourself that, okay, what's not killed me makes me a little bit tougher, and I'm going to just dig in.
What can I control? Don't try and control the uncontrollables, because we can't do that. Especially in a prep, you're potentially going to be more likely to suffer with things like injuries, or things that come from being deficient in certain things. You're running a deficit for quite some time, you're doing training while in that deficit, so the likelihood could be increased when you're in a prep. So it wouldn't be uncommon to get an injury or for something to go wrong, but it's about how you deal with that. And always remember, there are more shows. If for some reason you can't do that show that you had benchmarked, there's other opportunities. You could jump into a photo shoot if you're still, in good condition and you're not that far out and you want to still do something, and then, recover, go back into a prep, look at the bigger picture. It's not an indefinite date, and just be kind to yourself. Don't stress too much, because that will also contribute to how you're going to feel and how you can actually deal with this. And that's essentially our message today, isn't it? It's about, be objective, step out of where you're at, looking, and if this was, a friend or someone you knew that was going through this, what advice would you give them? How would they deal with it if they were to take your advice on? Could you resonate with how that makes you feel? And try and just give yourself a break. It is hard when it's acute. It's really, really hard when you injure yourself, when you're going through something. Your whole world exists for that reason, but it's then trying to process that and come away from that and look at how far you've already come.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we are really creatures that we often think that people think kind of the worst of us all the time. And I think that's a really challenging thing to dig into. But I think, we won't go crazy onto that now, but people usually, most of the time, whether it's strangers, obviously your close friends and things like that, they want to see you do well. They don't want to see you suffer through something. They don't want to see you criticize yourself or condemn yourself or say that you're not good enough or not worth. We're all on this planet trying to contribute to the world that we live in, which is a finite amount of time. And with whatever you're doing right now, see it as an opportunity just for you to have some enjoyment, some fun, and some, you're learning and exploring what these sort of feelings and things are all about for you, even the negative ones. Try and not let what you don't know, other people's opinions, what other people look like and everything else, stunt you, because it will hold you back, and you don't need that. You need to back yourself. You need to like put a little bit of TLC into you and think, nah, I've done this, I'm doing this for the reasons I've set out on, realign with that. And if you are in a moment of flicking, put the phone down, stop looking at other people, just go, do you know what? Fucking hell, they look great, but that's not me, so I'm not going to bother with that.
Yeah. It's also, if you do come across these points in diet phase, in an off season, whatever it is, where you need to change the direction, where you need to stop and reevaluate and go back to it at a later date, it doesn't mean that you're throwing the towel in. It means that you're being objective, you're seeing it for what it is, and you can take so many lessons from what you've already done, how you feel, and then move forward with those lessons and just keep reevaluating. Nothing is a definite path. You can always change your direction, go back to where you were heading in the first place. It's an ever evolving journey, this bodybuilding life, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And something you said there just sort of brought something up to my mind. Like, obviously we've spent a lot of time on this podcast today talking about things that you might experience if you're new coming into this, but just like as a sort of lasting note here, how do I sort of say this? Even like high achievers, people who are really successful, like people that perhaps are leading in their field. Maybe you're very good at your job. Maybe you're a director. Maybe you're somebody who's a high performing athlete. Even high achievers and people who are extremely successful have this kind of concern at points, as if they're going to be like found out or unmasked, or they're incompetent or like unable to replicate their past successes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
sure.
I could sit here and go, okay, I've taken a pro card in two of the biggest world natural federations in the world, right? And I've never been on stage since my last pro season. Am I doubting myself or second guessing myself and concerned like that I might not be able to do that again and bring up the goods, and worried what people will think, and maybe I'm not as good as I think I could potentially be? Have I got all those feelings that go through my mind? Absolutely. 100%. And like, it's so, I guess where I'm trying to go with this is, if you're somebody sitting listening to this podcast who's like actually does really well and has got a lot of success in their life, I bet you guys have also felt at points like, shit, is this all just fluke? Have I just managed to get here and I don't really know how to do this again? That's imposter syndrome for the successful people as well. So there's that, and those are natural experiences too, that you need to remind yourself, like, no, there's a reason you've got here. You've got skills, you've got attributes, you've got things that have made you work hard enough to get the successes that you've desired. Doesn't mean it's always going to be a guarantee that you get success, but you do have those skills, and you need to remember that you've got the tools there. So there's lots of like caveats to all applying to different people. I guess I just wanted to put that in there as well for anyone who's like thinking, I've done really well and now I'm scared I won't do it again.
Yeah, I always go back to, you are your own masterpiece, and it's an ever evolving project. There's so many different directions to upskill, there's opportunities to level up further and further, but recognize where you're at and understand that it is a journey. It's not an overnight thing if it's something that you're going to continue with for a long period of time.
100%.
And if people have listened and do relate to what we've said, it's been really cool. Like you said, the achieving true stage lean condition has been a really big hit, and we've had lots of story shares. People have sent us messages. So we really love that, because I myself always think, okay, so that means it's the right sort of subjects we're covering if we get this feedback come in. So keep doing that for us. We really, really appreciate it. And it helps us direct where we're taking the pod, the subjects we're going to cover. So keep reaching out. We love to hear from you.
100%. Lots of topic suggestions come our way.
And happy healing to Steff for that poor foot.
Yeah. And to anyone else who has an injury as well. Yeah, as always, you know where to come for more advice. Check us out. on the socials, and we'll catch up on the next one.
Awesome. See you later, Steff.
See you later.